I've always believed in paying attention to details, the small things, like the way a person shifts in their chair when they lie, or how their eyes dart away at the wrong moment. The way a smile can be too perfect, too rehearsed. It's a skill I picked up over time, mostly as a survival mechanism. This morning, as I sat at my sister-in-law Caroline's dining table for our monthly family brunch, that skill was screaming at me. Jessica, my wife, placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of me. Her lips curved into that sweet, effortless smile she had perfected over the years. "Made you a special coffee, honey," she said, her voice smooth as silk. Now, I don't claim to be a coffee connoisseur, but I know how coffee should smell. I know the deep, earthy aroma, the rich bitterness that fills the air before you even take a sip. This was different. The second the steam hit my nose, something twisted in my gut. There was an underlying scent, faint but unmistakable, metallic. I didn't react, didn't let my face betray a single flicker of suspicion. Instead, I picked up the cup, swirling the dark liquid gently, pretending to appreciate her effort. "How sweet," I murmured, offering a small smile in return. Jessica's eyes flickered, just for a second, barely noticeable unless you were looking, unless you knew what to look for. Across the table, Caroline stirred her own coffee lazily, her long nails tapping against the porcelain. She always played the role of the casual observer, watching, waiting, pretending she wasn't in on whatever was happening behind the scenes. I had learned the hard way that with these two, nothing was ever casual. Over the past year, I'd been sick more times than I could count. Stomach pains that kept me doubled over in bed, nausea so intense I could barely stand, emergency room visits with doctors scratching their heads, unable to explain why my body was betraying me. And always, it happened after a meal prepared by Jessica or during one of these brunches at Caroline's house. Coincidence? Maybe once, maybe twice. Not this many times. I had theories, of course. Wild, twisted suspicions that any sane man would dismiss. But I'd learned that ignoring the signs didn't make them disappear. So today, I had a plan. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a message. Then, with a perfectly timed stumble, I bumped the table just enough to make the cups clatter, just enough to create a moment of chaos. "Ah, damn," I muttered, steadying myself. Jessica's hand shot out, her fingers gripping the table's edge. A natural reaction, maybe, but her eyes went straight to my coffee cup. Not me, the cup. That told me everything I needed to know. As I straightened, I reached out, switching my coffee with Caroline's. It was quick, effortless. The kind of move you learn after years of playing defense in a game you never signed up for. Caroline barely glanced up, too absorbed in whatever she was typing on her phone. Jessica, though, she noticed. She recovered quickly, forcing another smile. But I saw the moment of hesitation, the way her throat worked as she swallowed. "Careful, honey," she said, her voice light. "Don't be too clumsy. Wouldn't want you spilling that special coffee I made just for you." I chuckled, lifting the new cup to my lips, pretending to sip. The scent still lingered in the air, twisting my stomach into knots. But now, it wasn't my problem anymore. I placed the cup back on the table, watching, waiting. 30 minutes. That's all it would take. Caroline didn't know it yet, but she was about to become the proof I needed, the proof that my own wife was trying to poison me. 30 minutes, that's all it took. I sat there, calm and patient, watching as Caroline's fingers trembled slightly around the handle of the coffee cup. At first it was subtle, barely noticeable, just a slight hesitation in her grip. But I saw it. I saw everything. Jessica sat beside me, her body stiff despite the relaxed smile she kept plastered on her face. She was watching too, though she tried to pretend otherwise. Every few seconds her gaze flicked toward me, then toward Caroline, then back to me again like she was expecting something to happen. The only problem? It wasn't happening to me. Caroline let out a breath, shifting in her seat. She rubbed her fingers against her temple like she was trying to shake off a headache. "Ugh," she muttered under her breath. "I feel weird." Jessica turned her head sharply, her smile faltering for just a second. "Weird? How?" Caroline frowned, blinking a few times. Her normally sharp eyes looked unfocused, like she was struggling to keep up with the conversation. "Just off. My hands feel tingly," she murmured, flexing her fingers. "And my stomach." Jessica's fingers curled around the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "Maybe it's just the heat," she said quickly, forcing a chuckle. "Or maybe you didn't eat enough this morning." I leaned back, resting my arm casually along the chair, pretending to be oblivious. Inside, my pulse was pounding. I knew that reaction. I'd lived it too many times. The nausea that starts as a pit in your stomach, spreading like an invisible sickness. The dizziness that makes the world tilt slightly, just enough to disorient you. The tingling in the fingers, the sudden weakness in the limbs. I'd felt all of it before, and now Caroline was feeling it. I glanced down at the coffee cup in front of me, the one that should have been mine. It was still untouched, the steam curling lazily into the air. That strange metallic scent still lingered, taunting me. Jessica's hand reached toward her own cup, but she didn't drink from it. She was watching, waiting. I saw the moment realization hit her. Her breath hitched, her back straightened, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, her eyes widened in horror before she masked it. Oh, she knew. She knew this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just paranoia on my part. She had planned this. She had expected me to drink that coffee. And now, as she watched Caroline's body betray her, the weight of her mistake was sinking in. The coffee was poisoned. And she had poisoned it. My own wife. I turned to Caroline, studying her carefully. Her breathing had quickened slightly, and her fingers were now gripping the table as if to steady herself. Her sharp tongue had been replaced by sluggish confusion. "What exactly did you put in that coffee, Jess?" I asked, keeping my voice light, casual. Jessica flinched. "What?" "Caroline doesn't look too good." I gestured to her sister, who was now pressing a hand against her stomach. And it's strange because that's exactly how I felt. Oh, let's say, the last 5 times I've had a meal at your sister's house. Jessica laughed, but it was forced, too high-pitched. "Nathan, that's ridiculous." "Is it?" I tilted my head. "Because I've been hospitalized, 3 times in the last 6 months, all with symptoms no one could explain. And now, I don't drink the coffee, but Caroline does, and suddenly she's sick. That's quite the coincidence, don't you think?" Jessica's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "You're being paranoid." Caroline let out a soft groan, rubbing her forehead. "Jess." Her voice was quieter now, almost breathless. "What was in that coffee?" Jessica's mask cracked. It was brief, barely a flicker, but I saw it. A glimpse of something raw, something panicked. "Caroline, don't be ridiculous." "It's just coffee," she snapped, a little too defensively. Caroline blinked up at her, her face pale. "No," I said, standing up slowly. "It's not just coffee. And you know that, don't you, Jessica?" Her eyes darted toward me, then toward Caroline, then back again, trapped. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocking it with a quick swipe of my finger. The recording app had been running since the moment she set that cup in front of me. "See, here's what's going to happen," I said evenly, my voice carrying across the table. "I'm going to call an ambulance. Caroline is going to get the medical attention she needs. And then I'm going to make sure they run a full toxicology screen. Jessica's hands clenched into fists. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she hissed. "Am I?" I raised a brow. "Then why do you look like you just saw a ghost?" She didn't answer. Caroline exhaled shakily.
"Jessica."
Her voice trembled, her fingers pressing against her chest. "Tell me the truth. Did you put something in that coffee?" Jessica's lips parted, but no words came out. She didn't need to say it. Her silence was the answer. I pressed the call button. 911, what's your emergency? "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I need an ambulance at 1207 Willow Creek Drive. My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee." Jessica's breath hitched. She had lost control of the situation. And now it was my turn to see how far this would go. The moment I hung up with 911, the air in the dining room grew suffocatingly thick. Jessica's face had lost all its color, her fingers clenched into trembling fists at her sides. Caroline groaned, her forehead damp with sweat, gripping the edge of the table like she was trying to anchor herself to reality. I watched Jessica carefully. She was too quiet, not rushing to Caroline's side, not trying to comfort her, not showing the panic of a loving sister watching her sibling suffer. No, she was calculating. Her mind was working overtime, trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. I wasn't going to give her the chance. "You were never expecting me to make this call, were you?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "You thought I'd be the one slumped over this table, too dizzy to think, too weak to fight back." Jessica flinched, her lips pressing into a tight line. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is just... Caroline probably just has a low tolerance for caffeine." I let out a humorless laugh. "Right, because caffeine poisoning looks exactly like the symptoms I had last month, and the month before that, and the month before that." Jessica's nostrils flared. "Nathan, stop it!" I took a slow step toward her, lowering my voice. "No, you stop it. No more gaslighting, no more brushing things off. I know what's been happening to me, and now, so does she." I gestured toward Caroline, who was now visibly shaking. "And guess what, Jessica? You made a mistake today. You tried to poison me again, and now the wrong person drank it. So tell me, what was in that coffee?" Jessica's eyes darted toward the front door as if she was considering bolting. That's when Caroline, her breath coming in sharp gasps, spoke. "Jess, what did you do?" Jessica whipped her head toward her sister, her panic morphing into something sharper, something almost desperate. "Nothing. I didn't do anything," she snapped. "Then why do you look so scared?" I asked, tilting my head. "You should be worried about Caroline right now, right? But you're not. You're worried about something else." Jessica turned to me, her eyes dark and frantic. "Nathan, just think for a second. Why would I ever try to hurt you?" I took another step forward. "That's the question, isn't it?" Caroline let out a shaky breath, her fingers curling weakly against the table. "Oh my God," she whispered, realization dawning on her face. "The board meeting." Jessica froze, and there it was, the crack in her armor. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I had suspected, but now I knew. Caroline's voice was weak, but her words cut through the tension like a blade. "That's why, isn't it? That's why you've been doing this to Nathan." She lifted her head, eyes glassy but filled with betrayal. "You wanted him out of the way." Jessica clenched her jaw. "You don't know what you're talking about." Caroline let out a bitter, rasping chuckle. "Oh, I think I do." She turned to me, eyes flickering with something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Nathan, I should have seen it. I should have known. I frowned. Known what? She swallowed hard. Jessica's been after your position at work for months. I exhaled slowly, my fingers curling into fists. Of course, the Henderson account, the biggest client of the year, the contract that had the potential to change everything. And I was leading the pitch. Jessica worked at the same firm, but she'd been struggling to land major accounts. She was good at what she did, but she didn't have the reputation I had built over the years. And Henderson, they had requested me personally. She must have seen it as a threat. She must have thought I was in her way. Caroline's voice was thick with regret. She kept saying how unfair it was, that you were stealing opportunities from her, how she was the one who deserved to be handling the firm's biggest clients. She let out a breathless, humorless laugh. I thought it was just talk. I didn't know she'd actually. Her voice broke off with a pained shudder. Jessica's hands were trembling now. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. I stared at her. What wasn't supposed to be like this? She looked up at me, something raw and desperate in her eyes. You weren't supposed to figure it out. A cold, empty silence stretched between us. You were just supposed to miss the meeting, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Just one meeting. Just one. So they'd think you were unreliable. So they'd let me take the lead instead. Her voice cracked, but you kept bouncing back. No matter what I did, you kept showing up. And then they gave you the next big account, and then the next, and the next. Her breath came in short, angry gasps. Do you know what it's like to work twice as hard, only to be overlooked again and again? She snapped, her voice rising. To have everything you deserve handed to someone else. I stared at her in disbelief. Deserve? You think you deserve my job? Jessica's face twisted with something ugly. Yes, she spat. I do. Because I work just as hard as you, but nobody ever notices me when you're in the room. I'm always just Jessica, just another employee, just your wife. She let out a shaky breath. I thought if you got sick, just once, just one time, I'd finally get my chance. My stomach turned. Caroline let out a wheezing, pained laugh. Well, congratulations, she croaked. You got your chance. And now you're going to prison for it. Jessica's face twisted in panic. Caroline, no. I didn't mean for this to happen. Shut up, I snapped, my voice like ice. Jessica flinched. I pulled my phone out again, tapping the screen. I recorded everything, I said coldly. You just confessed to poisoning me. Her eyes went wide. No, I didn't. I didn't mean. Doesn't matter, I interrupted. You said it. And the police are already on their way. Jessica's face twisted into something I barely recognized. A mixture of rage, panic, and sheer disbelief. You, she started, but the distant sound of sirens cut her off. Her head snapped toward the window, her hands shaking violently now. Caroline exhaled shakily. You done, Jess, she whispered. It's over. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Jessica realized she had lost. The sirens grew louder and Jessica's breath quickened. She looked like a cornered animal, eyes darting toward the front door, the windows, the hallway, anywhere that could offer an escape. But there was nowhere to run. I didn't take my eyes off her as I stood by Caroline's side, gripping my phone like it was my lifeline. Because right now, it was. A moment later, the paramedics burst through the front door, their voices brisk and professional as they moved toward Caroline. What are her symptoms? One of them asked, already kneeling beside her. She's dizzy, weak, nauseous, I listed, stepping back to give them space. Her hands have been shaking. She's having trouble keeping her balance. Caroline groaned as one of the medics checked her pulse, then flashed a light into her eyes. "Her pupils are dilated," he murmured to his colleague. "Possible toxic reaction." Jessica stood frozen in place, watching with wide eyes. "Ma'am," the paramedic turned to her, "do you know what she's ingested?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "I do," I said calmly. "She drank my coffee, the one my wife made specifically for me." The paramedic glanced at Jessica, his face unreadable. "Do you know what was in it?" Jessica's lips trembled. I just made regular coffee," she whispered. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on the recording. Jessica's confession echoed through the room. "You were just supposed to miss the meeting. Just one. So they'd think you were unreliable." The paramedic's head snapped up, his expression shifting immediately. What had been neutral concern turned to something much more serious. "We need to get her to the hospital now." Two medics lifted Caroline onto a stretcher as she whimpered in pain. "I'll ride with her," I said quickly. Jessica took a step toward me, her face pale. "Nathan." I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving her standing there as the police car pulled into the driveway. The ride to the hospital was tense. Caroline's breathing was shallow, and every few minutes she shivered violently despite the blanket wrapped around her. I sat beside her, watching helplessly as the medics administered oxygen, monitoring her vitals. "Nathan," her voice was faint. "You knew, didn't you?" I swallowed. I had my suspicions. She let out a weak, bitter laugh. "Guess we both learned the hard way." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The moment we arrived at the hospital, nurses rushed her into a treatment room while a doctor peppered me with questions. What she ate, what she drank, when the symptoms started. I told them everything. Then I handed over my phone. I recorded her admitting to it. I told the attending physician. "Check Caroline's toxicology report. I'd bet my life this isn't the first time my wife has done this." The doctor's expression darkened. "We'll run every test necessary." 2 hours passed. I sat in the waiting room, my hands clasped together, my thoughts spiraling. I replayed everything in my head. The months of illness, the lies, the dismissals. The careful way Jessica had orchestrated it all. The pieces fit too well. She had planned this. Every single step of it. She hadn't just wanted me to miss one meeting. That had been the start. But when that failed, she had escalated. Each time the symptoms grew worse. She had been slowly pushing, testing, seeing how far she could go without getting caught. And now, finally, she had gone too far. A door swung open, pulling me from my thoughts. Dr. Phillips, a tall woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, walked toward me. "She's stable," she said without preamble. "We were able to flush most of the toxins from her system. She's weak, but she'll recover." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Dr. Phillips studied me for a moment. "You were right to be concerned." The toxicology report confirmed the presence of a non-lethal but highly potent compound, one that shouldn't be in any food or drink. "We're running further analysis, but the initial results are alarming." My jaw clenched. "How alarming?" She hesitated, then handed me a tablet. The screen showed a list of chemical compounds, medical terms I barely understood, except for one word: rodenticide. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Phillips nodded grimly. "A slow-acting poison, often used in pest control. In small doses over time, it causes fatigue, nausea, muscle weakness. But in concentrated amounts..." She met my gaze. It could be fatal. My stomach churned. She hadn't just been trying to sabotage me. She had been trying to kill me. "Would you be willing to speak with law enforcement?" the doctor asked. I let out a slow breath. "I already have evidence, and I'm not stopping until she pays for what she's done." Dr. Phillips nodded as if she had expected nothing less. Just then a voice broke through the hospital's quiet hum. "Nathan?" I turned, and there she was, Jessica, standing at the entrance of the waiting room, her hair slightly disheveled, her breathing uneven. 2 uniformed police officers flanked her, their hands resting on their holsters. "Don't say a word," one of them instructed. Jessica's eyes locked onto mine, filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. Fear, desperation, remorse. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. My blood ran cold. The officer nearest to her stepped forward. "Nathan Bennett, we'll need a formal statement from you." I stood up, leveling my gaze at my wife, the woman I had once trusted, the woman who had loved me, or at least pretended to. "Don't worry," I said, my voice steady. "I'm ready to talk." Jessica's lips parted as if she wanted to plead, to beg, but she knew she had already lost. The officer turned to her. "Jessica Bennett, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to commit harm." The words echoed through the hallway. Jessica inhaled sharply. "Nathan," I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Her face crumbled. I turned away from her as the officers led her down the hall, their footsteps heavy against the tile floor. Dr. Phillips placed a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't over yet," she murmured. I nodded. No, it wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one at risk. Jessica was, and she was going to pay for what she had done. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above me as I walked into the small, sterile interrogation room. The walls were painted a dull beige, the air heavy with an unsettling stillness. Across the metal table, Jessica sat, her wrists handcuffed, her posture stiff. She looked different, not just physically, though the stress of the last few hours had certainly taken its toll. Her hair was messier than I'd ever seen it, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But it was something deeper. For the first time in our marriage, she looked small. Jessica had always been calculated, always controlled. She was the kind of woman who never let a single strand of hair fall out of place, who could walk into a room and command attention with a single glance. But now she was sitting in a police interrogation room waiting to hear just how much of her life was about to collapse. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. She didn't meet my gaze. "Why, Jessica?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Her shoulders tensed. "Don't act like you don't know," she muttered, still refusing to look at me. "I want to hear it from you." Jessica let out a breath, sharp, shaky. "I already told you. It wasn't supposed to be like this." I scoffed. "Oh, right. You only meant to make me sick, not kill me. That makes it so much better." She flinched at the sarcasm in my voice, but I didn't care. "I need to understand," I continued, my tone even. "I need to know how the woman I married, the woman I loved, could do something like this." Finally, she lifted her eyes, and for a brief moment I saw it, the flicker of something beneath the cold calculation. Regret, shame, or just the horror of getting caught. Jessica inhaled slowly. "Do you know what it's like, Nathan?" she asked softly. "What? To be invisible?" she whispered. I frowned. "Jessica, what the hell are you talking about?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You don't get it. You never had to get it. Everything has always been so easy for you." Her gaze sharpened, her fingers curling into fists. "You walk into a room and people listen to you. They respect you. They want to work with you. Meanwhile, I've spent years busting my ass at that company, and no one ever saw me. I exhaled through my nose, keeping my emotions in check. So, you decided to poison me. That was your solution? Jessica clenched her jaw. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You keep saying that. I leaned forward. But it did. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. I just wanted a chance. A real chance. But every time I thought I had an opportunity, you were there, taking every promotion, every major client, every account I worked twice as hard for. Her voice wavered. So yeah, at first, I just wanted you to slow down. Just enough for people to finally see me. I shook my head in disbelief. You don't sabotage people you love, Jessica. She blinked rapidly, as if my words had struck her, but she didn't deny it. You know what the worst part is? I asked, my voice growing rough. I trusted you. Even when I started getting sick, I never wanted to believe that it could be you.
Jessica's face twisted, her jaw tightening.
And yet, you did.
I narrowed my eyes.
Because the truth was impossible to ignore. You made sure of that.
Silence stretched between us, thick with all the things left unsaid. Then, quietly, Jessica spoke again. And Caroline? I tilted my head. What about her? She let out a slow breath.
Is she going to be okay? For the first time since this started, Jessica looked genuinely afraid. Not for herself, but for Caroline. She's stable, I said carefully. But she could have died, Jessica. Her lips parted slightly, her hands trembling against the table. She wasn't supposed to drink it, she murmured, almost to herself. It was never meant for her. I leaned forward, and I was never supposed to figure it out. But here we are. Jessica's gaze met mine, and for the first time I saw real remorse in her expression. But it wasn't enough, not even close. Do you regret it? I asked. She exhaled sharply. Getting caught? Yes. I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head. Of course. Because if I had just gone along with it, if I had kept drinking whatever you put in front of me, I'd still be sick. You'd still be winning, right? Jessica didn't answer. That's what I thought. Another long silence passed. Then Jessica took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. I should talk to my lawyer, she muttered. I stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, you should. I stood up, pushing the chair back. Jessica's eyes flickered with something. Maybe she had expected me to say more. Maybe she had hoped for some kind of absolution. But I wasn't offering it. Not after everything. I'm done, Jessica. My voice was firm, unwavering. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just watched as I turned and walked out the door. The second I stepped into the hallway, the weight on my chest lifted. Jessica had spent months trying to tear me down, trying to make me weak. But she hadn't won. I was still standing. And now I was ready to watch her fall. The moment I walked out of that interrogation room, I knew there was no going back. Jessica's betrayal was no longer a suspicion or a nightmare that haunted me in the quiet hours of the night. It was real, and now she was going to pay for it. Detective Morrison, the lead investigator, met me just outside the room. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, the kind of cop who had seen far too much of the worst parts of humanity. Well, he said, exhaling as he flipped through a small notepad. That was interesting. I crossed my arms. You heard everything? He nodded. Every damn word. Jessica's confession. What she said. What she didn't say was enough to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't just some misunderstanding or a desperate woman making a mistake. It was intentional. Morrison shut his notepad and gave me a long, assessing look. We're moving forward with formal charges, but we need more than just her words to ensure this sticks in court. I squared my shoulders. What do you need? He motioned for me to follow him down the hall. We've already gotten a warrant for a search of your home, Morrison explained as we walked. If she's been poisoning you for months, she had to keep whatever she was using somewhere. The toxicology report from your sister-in-law already confirmed foreign substances in her system. Ones that don't just end up in coffee. I clenched my jaw. So, if we find the source, then we have a rock-solid case. Morrison confirmed. We reached the main hospital entrance where 2 uniformed officers stood beside their patrol car waiting. My heart pounded against my ribs as the reality of the moment settled in. Jessica's life, the one she had so carefully built, so desperately protected, was about to come crumbling down. And for the first time, I didn't care. When we arrived at the house, it was surreal. Walking into what had once been my home. The officers moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, opening cabinets, drawers, even checking behind the fridge. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching as one of the officers went through Jessica's nightstand. You lived with her every day, Morrison said beside me. Did she ever seem nervous, like she was hiding something? I let out a slow breath. She was careful. Very careful. She never left anything obvious out in the open. But I knew Jessica, and I knew she wasn't invincible. We moved to the kitchen next. One officer was already digging through the spice cabinet, another checking the pantry. The detective in charge of collecting evidence turned to Morrison. We've got something. I followed them to the lower cabinet near the sink. The officer pulled out a small black box, setting it carefully on the counter. It looked unremarkable at first, just an ordinary storage container. But when they opened it, the air in the room shifted. Inside were bottles, small, carefully labeled vials of substances I didn't recognize, some with their original pharmaceutical labels, others without. Morrison picked one up, his expression darkening. This, he said, handing it to the evidence tech, isn't something you buy at a grocery store. I stared at the collection, my stomach churning. All this time, Jessica had been keeping a stock of whatever she had been using on me, like I was some experiment. One of the officers handed me a piece of folded paper. You might want to see this. I unfolded it, my hands tightening around the edges. It was a list. Dates, dosages, effects. She had documented everything. Every single time I had fallen ill, every headache, every emergency room visit, every unexplained sickness. Jessica had written it all down, like she was conducting some kind of sick, twisted study. Morrison let out a low whistle. Well, this is damning. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse roar in my ears. You're telling me? The realization hit me like a truck. She never planned on stopping. If I hadn't switched that cup with Caroline's, if I hadn't started questioning things, would I have survived the next dose? Would she have gone all the way? The thought sent ice through my veins. Morrison motioned to the officers. Bag all of it. We're done here. Back at the station, I watched from a distance as Jessica was led from her holding cell to a different interrogation room. She didn't fight, didn't try to run. But when she caught sight of me through the window, she hesitated for just a moment. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, or just fear of what happens next. Detective Morrison gestured for me to step inside the observation room. From here I could see and hear everything. But Jessica couldn't see me anymore. He sat across from her, setting the black box on the table with a thud. "You recognize this, don't you?" Jessica didn't answer. "You kept records," he continued, tapping the sheet of paper I had read earlier. "You documented every time you poisoned your husband, the amounts, the effects, even how much stronger you needed to make it each time." Jessica's jaw tightened. Morrison tilted his head. "Tell me, Jessica, was there ever going to be a point where you stopped? Or was Nathan just a problem you were planning to permanently remove?" She inhaled sharply, but again she didn't deny it. Morrison sat back, shaking his head. "Here's the deal. You're facing multiple charges, and trust me, none of them are going away. The evidence speaks for itself." He gestured to the vials. "These chemicals don't just end up in someone's coffee by accident." Jessica's hands trembled slightly in her cuffs. I wasn't trying to." "Save it," Morrison cut in. "The only thing left for you to decide is whether you want to fight this in court or cooperate." Jessica's face twisted, her breath uneven. Morrison didn't press her. He didn't need to, because we both knew the truth now. There was no coming back from this. Jessica had destroyed her life with her own hands, and as much as part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, I just couldn't. This was justice. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, his expression unreadable. I sat in a front row, my hands clenched together, watching as Jessica was led inside. She looked different from the woman I had married, smaller, weaker, as if the weight of her crimes had finally settled on her shoulders. She didn't look at me, not once. The trial had been long, grueling, and painfully public. The media had gotten hold of the story early on. A successful businessman poisoned by his own wife in a slow, methodical attempt to destroy his career. The details were too sensational for them to ignore. Jessica's defense team had tried everything. They painted her as a woman driven to desperation, overshadowed by her husband's success, pressured by a competitive industry. They argued that she hadn't meant to cause permanent harm, only to level the playing field. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution had laid it all out piece by piece. 1. The toxicology reports. The substances found in Caroline's system were traced directly to the vials recovered from our home. The slow-acting poison had been used in varying doses, just enough to cause sickness without immediate suspicion. 2. The recordings. My secret recordings from the brunch where Jessica confessed to sabotaging me were played for the jury. The sound of her voice, laced with frustration and entitlement, sealed her fate. 3. The documented pattern. The handwritten notes from our kitchen cabinet, Jessica's detailed log of my symptoms, had been particularly damning. The prosecutors called it a systematic experiment in cruelty. 4. The witness testimonies. Caroline had taken the stand, her voice shaking as she recounted how Jessica had dismissed her concerns over the years. My colleagues from work testified about my unexplained illnesses, my declining health, and how Jessica had subtly planted doubts about my reliability. When the lead prosecutor delivered his closing statement, I knew it was over. "This was not an accident," he said firmly, pacing the courtroom floor. "This was premeditation." Jessica Bennett did not act out of desperation. She acted out of calculation. She saw an obstacle in her husband, and instead of working harder, she tried to eliminate him. Jessica sat stone-faced as the jury was dismissed to deliberate. It didn't take them long. 2 hours later, they returned. The judge asked the foreperson to read the verdict. My heart pounded in my chest. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." Jessica inhaled sharply, her mask finally cracking. I let out a slow breath, closing my eyes for just a moment. It's over. The judge wasted no time. Given the overwhelming evidence, Jessica was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The words echoed in the courtroom, a final, undeniable truth. I didn't celebrate, I didn't cheer, because in the end, no one won. Jessica had lost her freedom, her career, and everything she had once valued. And me? I had lost a woman I had once loved. After the sentencing, I stepped outside the courthouse. The crisp air bit against my skin. Reporters were already swarming, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions. How do you feel now that justice has been served? What would you say to Jessica if you had the chance? I ignored them because the truth was, I didn't feel anything. Not relief, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just exhaustion. A soft voice pulled me from my thoughts. Nathan? I turned. Caroline stood a few feet away, her face pale but steady. She was still recovering, but she looked stronger than she had that day at the hospital. You okay? I asked. She let out a small, bitter laugh. Am I okay? My sister just got sentenced to prison for trying to poison my brother-in-law. So no, not really. I sighed. Yeah, same here. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Caroline shook her head. I don't understand her, she murmured. She had everything, a good career, a husband who loved her, a life she built from nothing, and she threw it away. I didn't respond right away because I didn't understand it either. I think, I said finally, Jessica convinced herself that nothing she had was ever enough. Caroline exhaled, rubbing her arms against the cold. You think she regrets it? I thought back to the courtroom, to the way Jessica had stared blankly at the table as the judge read her sentence. I don't know, I admitted. But it doesn't really matter anymore. Caroline nodded, because in the end, Jessica's regrets wouldn't change anything. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Months passed. Life slowly moved forward. Jessica's trial had been a spectacle, but soon people found new stories to obsess over. The headlines faded, the whispers at work quieted, and I healed. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. But day by day, I rebuilt. The Henderson account, the very contract Jessica had tried to sabotage, ended up solidifying my career. After hearing about the trial, the firm doubled down on their trust in me, offering more opportunities, more clients, more success than I had ever imagined. Jessica had tried to destroy me, and in the end, all she had done was make me stronger. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of a corporate event, staring out at the sea of faces in front of me. I had been invited as a keynote speaker, a recognition of my resilience, my work ethic, my success. As I stepped up to the microphone, I let the moment settle. Then I spoke. Success isn't just about talent or hard work, I began. It's about integrity. It's about the relationships we build, the trust we earn. I paused, my mind flickering back to everything I had been through. Sometimes, I continued, the biggest obstacles in our lives come from the people closest to us. And when that happens, we have two choices. We can let it break us, or we can let it fuel us. A quiet murmur ran through the crowd. I smiled faintly. I chose to rise, I finished, and I'm standing here today because of it. The room erupted in applause, and as I stepped away from the podium shaking hands with my colleagues, I realized something. I had survived. Jessica had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, I was the one who won. 1 year, It had been exactly 1 year since the trial ended. 1 year since Jessica had been sentenced to 25 years in prison. 1 year since I had walked out of that courthouse carrying the weight of betrayal, relief, and exhaustion all at once. And yet, despite everything, I was still here, stronger, thriving. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the first cup I had truly enjoyed in a long time, before setting it down on the polished mahogany desk in front of me. My office was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic outside the high-rise window. The skyline stretched before me, a reminder of how much had changed in just 12 months. A year ago, I had sat in this very chair, my mind clouded with doubt, the trail eating away at me like a slow poison. My career had been in shambles, my personal life even worse. I had spent months questioning everything, how I could have been so blind, how I had let someone I loved so deeply turn against me. But that was then. And now? Now I was at the top of my game. After the trial, the Henderson account, the very project Jessica had tried to sabotage, became one of the most successful campaigns our firm had ever handled. Clients took notice, my reputation grew, and as Jessica faded into irrelevance, I rose higher than ever before. "Nathan?" I glanced up from my desk as my assistant, Lauren, stepped into the office. "You have a call online too. It's from Nashville State Correctional." I went still. I didn't need to ask who it was. Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial, hadn't written, hadn't visited, hadn't acknowledged her existence. And yet here she was, reaching out from the prison cell she had so carefully crafted for herself. Lauren hesitated. "Want me to tell them you're unavailable?" I stared at the blinking light on my phone, debating. Then I nodded. "Yeah, do that." She gave me a knowing look before disappearing down the hall. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Jessica had already stolen enough from me. My time, my trust, my peace of mind. I wasn't about to give her another second. That evening, I met Caroline for dinner. It had become a tradition of sorts, checking in with each other, making sure we were both healing in our own ways. She had struggled after the trial, too. Losing her sister had left a void in her life, even after everything Jessica had done. "Guess who called me today?" I said as I poured her a glass of wine. She didn't even hesitate. "Jessica." I raised an eyebrow. "How'd you know?" Caroline let out a tired laugh. "She called me last week." I frowned. She shrugged. Begged for forgiveness. Said she regretted everything. Asked if I could help her get an appeal. I scoffed. "An appeal? After everything?" Caroline swirled the wine in her glass. "Yep. She swears she wasn't in her right mind, that she never meant to hurt you." I studied her carefully. "Do you believe her?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I think she regrets it, but not because she's sorry. I think she regrets getting caught." I nodded. That was exactly what I thought, too. Caroline tilted her head. "Are you going to visit her?" I let out a short laugh. "Not a chance." She didn't argue. Instead, she raised her glass. "To moving forward." I lifted mine in return. "To moving forward." Months passed. The media stopped talking about Jessica. People stopped whispering about the trial. And I stopped thinking about her. For the first time in years, I could wake up without feeling like I had to look over my shoulder. I could go to work, meet with clients, live my life without fear. One afternoon, as I prepared for yet another high-profile pitch, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it until I saw the subject line. Henderson account, contract renewal. I opened it immediately, scanning the message. They were extending their contract for another 3 years. I sat back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. Jessica had tried to take everything from me, and yet, despite all her efforts, I was still winning. That weekend, I took a trip out to the lake. I hadn't been back since before everything happened. But standing there, watching the water ripple under the afternoon sun, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my saved messages. Then, with a deep breath, I deleted every single one of Jessica's texts. The ones where she had played the doting wife, the ones where she had pretended to care, the ones where she had sent passive-aggressive remarks about my career, my success, my future. One by one, I erased them, and with each deleted message I felt lighter, freer. Jessica's name no longer held weight over me. Her choices, her betrayal, her downfall, it was hers to carry now, not mine. And as I walked back to my car, taking one last look at the lake, I smiled. Not because I had won, not because she had lost, but because after everything, I had finally found what she never could. Peace.